Welcome to the second episode of Retro Tech Bites, where we take a look at the history of a piece of software or hardware that was either historically significant or just has an interesting story attached to it. Today, we will be looking at the history of a unique piece of 3D graphics software called the 3D Toolkit. The story starts with one man's dream to take a software program called Electric Image Universe, a hugely expensive piece of software used by Industrial Light and Magic to create effects for Terminator 2, The Mask, Men in Black, The Phantom Menace, and many others, and affordably get it in high-quality training into the hands of anybody who wanted it. Alex Lindsay was that man, a veteran of ILM's Rebel Mac unit, and a man who felt that the barriers to learning professional 3D were preventing many budding artists from getting the training and experience they needed. Existing options were too expensive, accessible training was too limited, and Lindsay felt that affordable high-level software, paired with excellent training, would be eagerly embraced by budding 3D artists. He was determined to create what he referred to as the next generation of visual media artists by giving them access to powerful software for a bargain basement price, with a product that combined professional software with professional training, all for one low price and a single purchase. This would also have benefits for low or no budget filmmakers, with a 2002 Macworld article saying that fan filmmakers and indie movie makers who need computer graphics for their film work would also greatly benefit from Lindsay's new product. In a July 2001 interview Lindsay did with Games for Mac, he laid out the lofty end goals of the 3D Toolkit. By making the learning process easier by an order of magnitude, we think we will usher in a new generation of artists. Just as Photoshop and Illustrator changed the face of print and 2D design, we think the 3D Toolkit has a chance to do the same with 3D. The original press release for the 3D Toolkit stated the following: DV Garage and Electric Image announced the first low-cost, integrated training system designed to teach 3D principles and techniques to visual artists in all industries. The system is called the 3D Toolkit and will include DVD-based training hosted by Alex Lindsay, DV Garage founder and former Industrial Light and Magic animator, as well as a full version of Electric Image Animation System 2.9, which originally sold for $2,295 and was used to create 3D effects in Star Wars Episode 1 and many other blockbuster productions. The 3D Toolkit will be available for the Macintosh in late July for only $199. In many ways, the 3D Toolkit is giving to everyone what I wish I had when I was getting started, explains Lindsay. It represents a true democratization of content creation. No longer will success in this industry solely rely on the limited access to expensive schools or software, but rather talent and dedication. We are giving away the keys to the 3D kingdom, and this is only the beginning. Unfortunately, this ambitious dream never quite got off the ground, and ultimately the 3D Toolkit would be forgotten, with few people remembering it and even fewer people using it. But how did this happen? How could such a remarkably powerful piece of software, something that normally costs thousands of dollars per license, yet was made available for as low as $99 and came with hours upon hours of training by an ILM expert, fail to make an impression and eventually sink without a trace? I mean, if Reddit doesn't know about it, can it really exist? Let's go back and look at some history. Beginning in the 1970s, the computer revolution began to play an increasing role in movie making. Starting with the primitive computer effects of Westworld and Future World, computerized visual effects moved at a rapid pace throughout the next couple decades. From the wireframe graphics of the Star Wars Trench Run briefing, to the solid 3D modeling and animation of Tron, to the revolutionary CGI used in Terminator 2, computers were able to create more and more amazing graphics. But in tandem with the growth of computer graphics was the decreasing cost of the hardware and software needed to produce it. By the late 1980s, revolutionary products such as the video toaster began to bring visual effects and computer-generated imaging to the desktop computer. And by the early 90s, shows such as Babylon 5 were being produced using a fleet of Amigas to produce the CGI. The video toaster originally ran only on the Amiga, a remarkably advanced machine that sadly was never given its due, and thanks to Commodore's ineptness, eventually vanished from the marketplace. However, the video toaster's modeling and animation software, called Lightwave 3D, survived to the present day and is still a significant player in the desktop modeling and animation market. The video toaster wasn't the only advanced 3D modeling and animation tool for the desktop to come out of the 1980s, however, as a powerful software package called the Electric Image Animation System was released in the late 1980s exclusively for the Macintosh. Since that's a bit of a mouthful to say, I will just refer to it as Electric Image going forward. forward. Now, Electric Image wasn't originally the full CG pipeline, it was purely an animation and rendering package, meaning that the modeling needed to take place in a different program and then be exported to Electric Image. Electric Image entered the 90s at the perfect time. With the price of hardware dropping, it found increasing adoption in Hollywood and was used on films such as Terminator 2 and TV shows such as The X-Files. One of Electric Image's strongest features was its render engine, which was capable of producing film-quality results in a reasonable time frame, even using the comparatively slow Macintosh hardware of the day.
And one company that's really parlayed the power of the Mac into a dominant position as a Hollywood special effects software developer is Electric Image, and Jay Roth is Chief Technology Officer at Electric Image. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Stuart.
You guys have been working on the Mac, developed your software on the Mac, and just so we know what level we're talking about, I mean, give us the credits of some of the movies that have included stuff you've done on your software.
Star Wars Special Edition, Terminator 2, Mission Impossible, Spawn, The Mask, pretty much any...
This is it. I mean, this is the highest end stuff we see in the movies, right?
Yes, absolutely correct.
This was one of the reasons why, when Industrial Light and Magic decided to set up the Rebel Mac unit, an internal group that only used desktop computers instead of ILM's typical expensive SGI workstations, Macintoshes running Electric Image were chosen. The Rebel Mac unit put their Macs and Electric Image to good use on the special editions of the original Star Wars trilogy, as well as Men in Black and The Phantom Menace, although I do not believe it was used on any Jar Jar Binks shots, allowing it to escape without damage to its reputation. This gets us to 2001. By this point, Electric Image had been renamed slightly to Electric Image Universe to reflect the fact that it now included Modeler, a full NURBS modeling program. NURBS stands for Non-Uniform Rational B-Splines, by the way. This has nothing to do with the video, but is fun to say. With the addition of the modeler, Electric Image was thus capable of handling the entirety of the production flow from start to finish, starting with creating a 3D model and taking it all the way through adding materials, rigging, animating, and rendering. Electric Image was also available on Windows and Solaris as well by this time, but its main home remained the Macintosh. Now, how does all of this backstory tie into the subject of today's video? Well, let's take a little bit of a look into the state of amateur and fan film video production at the start of the 2000s. At this time, desktop video production had reached full steam, moving what had previously required specialty workstations to the standard hardware of a Windows or Macintosh personal computer in all areas of film production, from editing to graphics to computer-generated imagery. In the area of video editing, Apple's iMovie had brought the power of digital video editing to the Macintosh for free in 1999, and feature films were starting to be edited on desktops running Final Cut Pro. Adobe Photoshop had been available for well over a decade, and Adobe After Effects was mature enough for older versions to be picked up somewhat affordably. Thousands of indie and fan film creators were starting to see Hollywood-level production quality as a genuine possibility for their low-budget or no-budget productions. This was especially notable in the Star Wars fan film area, as Star Wars fans realized that they could actually do lightsabers and spaceships on their home computers. Or if you needed lightsabers but didn't have the money for even an older version of After Effects, programs like the $65 Alam DV could give you the ability to do marginally serviceable lightsabers, as well as other effects such as lightning and muzzle flashes. If you wanted to do an indie film that didn't require 3D assets, and you already had a DV camera and a computer that met the minimum hardware specs for editing DV footage, you could be up and running with a copy of Final Cut or Premiere and ready to go, at least software-wise, for well under $1,000. But what if you wanted to do something more advanced, something with a lot of green screen work that required entirely digital sets including 3D animated assets and maybe an animated character or two? This presented a problem. Cinema quality 3D modeling and animation was still primarily the domain of expensive software packages such as Maya, Lightwave, 3D Studio Max, and Electric Image, which, although it had dropped from its original price of $7,500, was still a painful $2,000. Open source software did exist, but the options were very limited. Animator had been released in 1999, but was still in early development and in fact would not see its version 1.0 release until May of 2017. Wings 3D was a free modeler that saw its initial release in 2001, but it lacked any form of animation tools and was of course also very early in development at this time. Blender of course was around, but it was in a very different state than it is today, both in usability and features. In 2001, Blender was at version 2.1, and with a development history back to 1994, it was somewhat mature as a program, but was fiendishly difficult to learn, and although freeware since 2000 would not go fully open source until October of 2002. The parent company of Blender at the time, Not a Number, however, spent a couple years following a freemium strategy with it, with Blender itself being free but certain advanced features locked away and cost $95 to unlock, although I believe this was done away with in June of 2000. The quality of what Blender could generally produce outside of a handful of experts tended to be pretty low, although there were of course those that could produce really high quality work with it. A Blender 1.74 demo reel from 2000 was recently found and uploaded, so here are some examples of what it could do around this time frame. As a side note, until doing the research for this video, I was not aware that in 2000 Blender was available for BOS systems, but did not have a Macintosh version until December of 2001. Ultimately, due to Blender's missing features, extensive learning curve, no availability on Macintosh, limited professional use, and even doubts about its future, it wasn't really an attractive option for most, and it was undoubtedly the most powerful of the free 3D packages available. Essentially, free software wasn't really an option for most would-be filmmakers in 2001 who wanted the capabilities and quality of a professional 3D application. Commercial options that were affordable, such as Bryce, were not designed for a full CGI pipeline, lacking many of the tools and options required to model a 3D asset, apply textures, set up lights, rig for animation if needed, and render it all out efficiently. Speaking as somebody who also bought Bryce 5 back in that day, it was especially painfully slow when it came to rendering, and I remember getting weird distortions in some of the models when they were animated to pass over the virtual camera. There was definitely a need in the market for a powerful 3D software package that was affordable, had good training available, boasted plenty of features, was used in the industry and thus could open doors to professional work, and could produce cinema quality output. Electric Image Universe met all of these criteria except for one. To buy the full version of Electric Image Universe in 2001 was $1,999, and this pricing wasn't out of line when compared to its competitors, as Lightwave, Maya, and 3ds Max were all priced similarly, or even higher, with Lightwave 6.5 coming with a retail price of $2,495 and Maya retailing for a mildly shocking $7,500, although it did receive a price cut down to $1,999 in early 2002. Even today, these programs are not cheap, and they cost quite a bit more back in 2001, especially when 20 years of inflation is factored in. This was also before YouTube and the easy availability of video tutorials, so after spending close to $2,000 on the software, the would-be filmmaker was then faced with the always daunting task of learning how to use it. Learning such complicated software using a pieced-together curriculum of books and VHS or DVD tutorials was absolutely doable, of course. It just made for a higher barrier to entry for budding artists. In 2001, a Star Wars fan film by the name of Duality was released that made quite the buzz and was downloaded over 500,000 times within a year. Keep in mind that since this was years before YouTube, these downloads were done over primarily dial-up connections from either its own website or various other mirrors. Duality was even featured on Apple's website under their QuickTime Hot Picks section. Created by Dave McComber and Mark Thomas, Duality was 6 minutes long and was shot entirely against blue screens. Every single set was built digitally, and the film even featured digital doubles for a couple long shots, together with an animated spaceship and floating droid with animated parts and a distinguishable personality. And all of its impressive CGI was created using Electric Image Universe, running on normal G3 and G4 PowerPC Macs. Duality showed a lot of indie filmmakers and fan film enthusiasts what was possible and made a lot of people aware of Electric Image Universe, but those who wanted to make their own films using it still faced the same two problems. It was expensive, and it was hard to learn. But Alex Lindsay had a plan to fix both issues simultaneously with the 3D Toolkit. Lindsay was not only extremely familiar with Electric Image Universe from his time with ILM, but according to a Macworld interview, he also felt that it was relatively straightforward to learn and has a lot of power under the hood, making it a natural choice for the 3D Toolkit. Lindsay started a new company, DV Garage, and somehow worked a deal out with Electric Image to offer a slightly older, somewhat stripped-down version of Electric Image for sale at a bargain basement price. Electric Image was then at version 3.0, and Lindsay was able to secure a license for the previous version, 2.9, the very same version used on Star Wars The Phantom Menace. Lindsay would take the 2.9 version as the base, and the DV Garage team would use that to make the 3D Toolkit. Most excitingly, while the 3D Toolkit would place almost the entirety of what was otherwise a $2,000 program into creators' hands, even better would be the hours of in-depth QuickTime video tutorials that came with it. These tutorials, primarily taught by Lindsay himself, could take somebody from knowing nothing about computer graphics all the way to producing high-end graphics in a matter of weeks. Lindsay himself clearly felt that the tutorials were really the standout selling point, stating that users would have unparalleled access to learn 3D modeling, animation, and rendering in a systematized fashion, starting from basic tutorials, then intermediate, and finally expert-level tutorials, with each level carefully building on the previous. These tutorials were not thrown together either, as they were the crown jewel of the 3D Toolkit. Lindsay and his team at DV Garage carefully built them out using extensive testing to find gaps in the training that tripped up newcomers. In a September 2001 Macworld interview that focused on the first version of the 3D Toolkit, Lindsay stated, "As we started testing our product, we found holes that we felt beginners would fall through. They're probably the same holes others who are building training have run across, except we decided to fill them." In the process, 75 minutes of basic training became 5 hours of animated tutorials. We could have simply shipped the original product, but by making the adjustments, we feel we are truly creating a groundbreaking product that will finally fulfill on our promise to make 3D accessible to everyone. Lindsay and his team were determined to make the 3D Toolkit the best combination of a powerful 3D program with extensive training possible, something that could take practically anybody, even those who knew little to nothing about 3D, and take them all the way through to a professional level. The 3D Toolkit would be an entirely self-contained system with purchasers needing no additional materials to affordably learn how to use the power of electric image to create professional quality 3D. As Lindsay said in a Macquarium interview, "The 3D Toolkit really fed my desire to give everyone the opportunity to do 3D work, whether it was professionally or for their school project. Cost and complexity are the greatest challenges to getting into 3D. With the 3D Toolkit, we handle both." And the cost was just as attractive as the included training. Although the 3D Toolkit's primary price was $199, it was frequently on sale for only $99, including at its launch in summer of 2001. I also found a post on the Force.net's forums where a guy was able to stack an additional discount on top of the $99 sale price to wind up paying only about $65. No matter the price, the 3D Toolkit gave a huge amount of value. The end result of all of Lindsay's and his team's work definitely lived up to all quality expectations, and those that bought it and took advantage of all the training would become very proficient in 3D in all aspects of the CGI pipeline. When the 3D Toolkit was updated to version 2 in 2002, even more tutorials were added and the existing ones overhauled and updated where needed. Reviews of the product were overall very positive. I actually couldn't find any negative ones, although the sample size is definitely not very large. For example, on February 20th, 2002, a review article was posted on the Force.net saying, "I think DV Garage has outdone itself. They could have easily broken the toolkit down into different user levels and charged $300 for each. They've shown a desire to help all artists, whether the newbie or veterans, to become better. If you are seriously considering a job in the 3D industry or just want to learn how to create models for your fan film, this should be on your must-get list." So what exactly were the compromises that Electric Image required of Alex Lindsay and DV Garage in order to allow them to sell the 3D Toolkit at such a massive discount? Well, there were really two significant ones. First of all, the IK rigging tools had to be removed. IK rigging allows a character model to be tied to a skeletal system for animation, so that if the animator moves the hand, the wrist, elbow, and arm all naturally move as well. Without an IK system, there really was no good way to animate humanoid characters requiring some form of skeletal animation, although things like floating droids, flying spaceships, and similarly animated creations could be animated without issue. The 3D Toolkit did retain the ability to apply motion capture data to a model, which you can see here with this little battle droid animation I personally did in the toolkit over 15 years ago, following one of the included tutorials. Yes, I personally was one of the customers for the 3D Toolkit, which I bought to use on a Star Wars fan film that my teenage self was sure would be the next big thing in the fan film world. Fortunately, the footage is nowhere online and the world is definitely better for it. Here is one more shot that I did for that film with a spaceship model that I found online somewhere. As I recall, I animated it very basically in Electric Image, then rendered it out on my G4 PowerBook against black because I didn't understand alpha channels, dropped it into After Effects 5.5 and used screen mode to passively blend it with the matte. I remember finding Electric Image's animation and material editor pretty straightforward to pick up thanks to the tutorials, although I never progressed very far through them due to teenage impatience. The last thing that was stripped out of the 3D Toolkit was the ability to utilize plugins. Electric Image had a respectable plugin system in the 90s and early 2000s, with plugins that extended Electric Image's capabilities in all sorts of ways, enhancing existing features or adding entirely new ones. Plugins like Blaster, Dante, and Tsunami allowed for effects such as building destructions, enhanced smoke and fire, and water simulations. Based on an interview Lindsay did, it's also possible that the ability to use plugins was not deliberately removed, but rather was a side effect of removing Electric Image's normal requirement to have a hardware dongle attached for license validation. These dongles were also apparently used by most, if not all, plugins to validate that they were running on a legitimate copy of Electric Image. Since the 3D Toolkit didn't use a dongle, no plugin would be able to authenticate. Originally, apparently the agreement required the 3D Toolkit to be Macintosh only, however this seems to have been dropped really quickly as future versions were ran on both Windows and Mac. In my personal opinion, the omission of IK rigging is the only missing feature that might have caused potential CG artists to reconsider buying the 3D Toolkit. However, losing these abilities really wouldn't matter too much to most of the target audience, as those were some of the most advanced and specialized features that most fan film or indie productions would have little to no use for. Additionally, thanks to the partnership Lindsay had created with Electric Image, any filmmaker that did need these advanced features could upgrade from the 3D Toolkit to the latest full version of Electric Image at a steep discount. One other point of interest is that these removed features were entirely from the animation module. The modeler seems to have remained untouched. I think that the 3D Toolkit might have also kept the full version's ability to do network rendering, although I highly doubt anybody ever used it. One of the first customers for the 3D Toolkit was a self-taught filmmaker by the name of David Nutley. Nutley had just finished a short Star Wars fan film of his own, Dark Skies, that had garnered some major attention from British media back in 2000. It had been shot with his family and friends and boasted some extremely good effects for 2000, and David had big plans for his follow-up project. He was kind enough to give me an interview on his use of the 3D Toolkit and what it allowed him to accomplish for his follow-up Star Wars fan film. For Dark Skies, he had only made use of some pre-built models using the free version of Strata 3D, which was extremely limited in its capabilities. But for his next Star Wars fan film, Nutley wanted to create all of his own 3D models himself and really push his skills to the next level. For him, although the fact that Duality had used Electric Image was neat, the biggest selling point of the 3D Toolkit was that not only could he get the same software Duality had used for a massive discount, but it came with phenomenal training taught by an ILM expert. David said, "They used it for Duality, and I loved the quality of their renders and wanted some of that. It seemed to be being used in a lot of high-end feature films, and again, if it was good enough for them, it was good enough for me. It wasn't stupidly expensive either, considering the feature set, and very importantly, it worked on a Mac platform, which, for example, 3D Max didn't. Alex Lindsay used it for the ships in the Phantom Menace, as I recall, and suddenly here's that guy offering a course on how to use the same software for not a lot of money. It was a total no-brainer, as I didn't really know how to use Strata but could get a shot out. But this was an opportunity to actually learn Electric Image 3D properly. The tutorials the 3D Toolkit came packed with quickly allowed David to get up to speed on the whole CGI pipeline, allowing him to start producing some incredible-looking shots for his fan film, now called Storm Ahead. His goal with Storm Ahead was to make a roughly 6-minute film that was shot entirely against green screens that told the tale of a Rebel Alliance Jedi who was infiltrated into the Clone Trooper production facility, with the goal of putting some of Jar Jar Binks' DNA into the process, ensuring that all future stormtroopers would be incompetent and unable to, for example, shoot straight. Partway through post-production on Storm Ahead, Nutley wound up using the discount to upgrade from the 3D Toolkit to the full version of Electric Image. He can't remember any specific reason for doing it, as at the time all of his needs were being met by the 3D Toolkit's capabilities, but the massive discount offered on the full version was just too good to pass up. He definitely would have needed the IK rigging of the full version of Electric Image at some point, as Storm Ahead's trailers did feature at least one CG bipedal robot whose animation would have been almost impossible to do without IK rigging. Unfortunately, I have been unable to find out exactly how much the discount on the full version of Electric Image was, but David thinks he paid around £300 to upgrade, putting it at around $450 to $500 in 2002. I also found a CG Society post from January of 2003 that cited $799 as the upgrade price, and a review from 3D-Gate that put the upgrade price at $1,295. Most likely the discount price was changed in line with Electric Image's price drops, as by 2003 the price had fallen to $1,295 for the full version. Whatever the price point at the time was, it was a steep enough discount that it made sense for David to upgrade. As he puts it, I can't remember what the deal was, but it was clearly cheap enough that I bought it, even though I didn't 100% need it at the time, which is why I upgraded so quickly. He had no issue with making the transition and says it was a super smooth transition. I still use the Toolkit training with the full version, as it was basically the same thing. David's comment points to the great strength of the 3D Toolkit, where the training and tutorials that came with it seamlessly transferred over to the full version of Electric Image, because it was, after all, essentially the full version of Electric Image 2.9. As Alex Lindsay said in the Mac for Games interview, the 3D Toolkit is revolutionary in two ways. First, and most obvious, it ships with a full working version of a production application. Secondly, and more importantly, it comes with cutting-edge training. This training was so comprehensive and efficient that, in David's words, learning 3D software was and still is hard, but Alex held our hands and got us to the point where we could create decent content fairly quickly. David was able to quickly get up to speed and created a number of striking CGI models, animations, and backgrounds for Storm Ahead, all of which hold up quite well even today. Sadly, David eventually had to cease working on Storm Ahead, as it was becoming impractical to continue pouring time and money into a project that, as it was a fan film, could never be monetized. Additionally, his previous Star Wars fan film, Dark Skies, had cost him over $1,000 a month in hosting fees at one point, And with Storm Ahead gaining quite a bit of buzz just from the 2 teasers David had released, it was clear that continuing the project would definitely lead to more massive hosting bills that just didn't make sense to deal with. Keep in mind that YouTube was still several years away at this point, and there was really no good way to cheaply share a video to tens of thousands of people. David also was getting quite a bit of professional work thanks to what he had already accomplished, and it made sense to focus on that over a project that could only end up costing an unknown and probably quite large amount of money. David is now the creative director for Nutley & Nutley, an advertising agency in England that he founded back in 2000. Today, the unfinished Storm Ahead remains the only significant production I am aware of that used the 3D Toolkit to any degree. I did a lot of Googling. I went back through archived versions of DV Garage's website, which is long since defunct and currently is owned by a company that, so far as I'm aware, has no connection to the original DV Garage. Going through archived versions of DV Garage from 2001 to 2005, I found a couple more links to reviews and articles, but only a couple, as the press page had no new links after 2001, and I found no mention of any films. I also went through every related forum thread on the Force.net's fanfilms forum trying to find a significant Star Wars production apart from Storm Ahead and came up empty every single time. 2 Reddit threads I started also resulted in 0 comments of any sort, let alone any leads on productions using the toolkit. While a number of people undoubtedly purchased the 3D Toolkit, David seems to have been the only one to really push it for a full production. I would love to find out that I was wrong on this, so if you're watching this and you bought the 3D Toolkit back in the day and used it on a production, please reach out to me. I would love to hear your story. The 3D Toolkit ultimately went through several iterations, although it's difficult to find out just what the differences were, as everything I found seemed to point to all 3 Toolkit versions being based off of Electric Image 2.9. One update added OS X compatibility, and eventually the toolkit was also made available for Windows. Electric Image itself promoted the 3D Toolkit, prominently featuring it on their website. They clearly saw the 3D Toolkit as a valuable product that could drive more users to Electric Image. The homepage link went to a detailed write-up of the 3D Toolkit's features, the training that came with it, and selected quotes, including one from John Knoll, the co-creator of Photoshop, who said, "As a longtime user of Electric Image, I think the 3D Toolkit provides a tremendous opportunity to get into 3D. I think it's important to point out that you could download a 30-day fully functional demo of the 3D Toolkit directly from Electric Image's website, along with quite a few of the DV Garage trainings." In other words, Electric Image fully supported the 3D Toolkit and integrated it into the website, instead of just throwing a cursory link to DV Garage somewhere and leaving it at that. They clearly fully supported Lindsay's vision for the 3D Toolkit and put real effort into making visitors to their website aware of it, at least through the end of 2002. However, it just never seemed to take off, and articles on it seemed few and far between. But those that did mention a review of the 3D Toolkit uniformly gave it high ratings, praising the price, power, and excellent tutorials, as previously mentioned. A Macworld article from November 28, 2001 says that the 3D Toolkit had just won the Best Buy award from Digit magazine. This publication appears to be a UK-based magazine that is now called Digital Arts. Their review gave the 3D Toolkit 4.5 out of 5 stars and finished by saying that the 3D Toolkit was for anyone who wants to get their hands on movie-level special effects software for a ludicrously affordable price. Ultimately, the 3D Toolkit and the training that came with it played a significant role in David Nutley's career, as he says that it got me up and running in the world of 3D and made me realize I could not only create my own 3D content, but also quite soon after understood that I could use it for my own clients' work too. It was all about being able to create original content, because then I could do stuff that clients would pay for. And I think David's experience shows that Alex Lindsay's goal of making an affordable way for talented people to learn professional 3D skills on professional software was achieved with the 3D Toolkit. I asked David why he felt the 3D Toolkit never saw the success that it should have. He thinks that the original Mac-only focus hurt it, as well as the fact that it struggled to import 3ds files, which was and still is a very common and interchangeable file format for 3D models. Without being able to easily import downloaded 3D models, the user would be required to build all of their own models, which, although exactly what David wanted to do for Storm Ahead, was probably not what most filmmakers wanted to do. David also thinks that the wide availability of cracked versions of 3D Studio Max may have further hurt the toolkit, saying, "Although I eulogized about it, and DV Garage in general all of the time, no one really seemed to use it much. I guess it still cost some money, and a lot of people had a cracked version of 3D Max on their PCs, which was fine for them." It's also very possible that choosing Electric Image as the product the 3D Toolkit was based off of was a mistake, as Electric Image itself struggled through the 2000s and is today a mere shadow of its former 90s self. Due to a licensing disagreement with the company that provided the modeler, Electric Image 5.5 shipped without a modeling program, reverting back to its old self in this regard, and to this day actually still does not have a modeling program. Losing the modeler was the last last straw for David, who had upgraded from 3 to 4 and then to version 5, and felt that the modeler was one of Electric Image's strongest points, and still considers it the easiest and most intuitive modeling program he has ever used. When version 5.5 was released with no modeler, David switched over to Maya, which he was also interested in due to its far superior particle system. Few people use Electric Image today, with its Facebook group only having around 500 followers as compared to 14,000 for Maya, 21,000 for Lightwave, and 63,000 for the Blender 3D Facebook group. Electric Image has also changed hands multiple times in the last 25 years, starting when Play Inc. bought the company in 1998, then sold it back to the original founders in 2000, who released versions 4 through 8, and then it was finally sold off to Thomas Ager, Igor Yatensko, and Igor Ivanik in 2010. However, little development seems to have occurred for the past 8 years, since the most current version, 9.1, was released all the way back in 2013. According to Electric Image's Facebook, there is a version 10 coming at some point, but the last time it was mentioned in their feed was over a year ago. Still, it does cling on in some productions, and its small user base is very dedicated to it. Electric Image has always been the product of a small company, and it's very possible that it just couldn't capitalize properly on the opportunity that the 3D Toolkit represented. Had things gone just a little differently, and with a bit of luck, it's very possible that the 3D Toolkit could have fed a steady stream of artists and animators into the industry, most of whom would have preferred to stick with a program they learned on, leading to Electric Image being equal to Maya or Blender today in popularity and usage. And that wraps up the story of the 3D Toolkit. Ironically, this video was supposed to only be about 10 minutes long, but as I kept digging into the material, the video just kept getting longer and longer. I want to give a special thanks to David Nutley for his patience and thoroughness in answering a lengthy series of questions. As the only significant figure that I could find who heavily used the 3D Toolkit, his perspective and memories were invaluable to putting this video together. He still maintains the old Storm Ahead website, which I've linked to below in the description. Please head over there and check it out. He has some very cool stuff there. It's like a time capsule from the height of the Star Wars fan film days in 2002 and 2003. Since all of the footage for Storm Ahead was shot, I still haven't given up hope that someday we will get to see the story of how Jar Jar Binks' DNA was used to ensure that all of the Empire's stormtroopers had terrible aim. And if you look at the 3D models section of the Storm Ahead website, you will see that they are credited to Electric Image from dvgarage.com. In other words, the 3D Toolkit. I won't link to any directly, but it is possible to find and download the Macintosh and PC versions of the 3D Toolkit from several major Macintosh abandonware sites, and the downloads come complete with all of the many hours of tutorials included. This was a fun video to make, and I had a lot of fun going down a bunch of internet rabbit holes and using the Wayback Machine to research old dead links. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching.